Hello and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, Israel reacts to the new American president-elect Donald Trump. Obama may not end up surprising Israel during his lame duck period, and Germany investigates Facebook on charges of anti-Semitic hate speech. I'm Natasha Kirchak here with the latest news in Israel. Americans have voted and the news is in. Donald Trump is set to be the 45th president of the United States. His Democratic rival Hillary Clinton may have won the popular vote, but Trump reigns supreme in the Electoral College, and over here in Israel, lots of Israeli leaders are welcoming the president-elect with open arms. Israel follows the United States election more closely than most, largely because of the close relationship between the two countries and the Jewish state's high number of dual citizens. Following Trump's major win, some of Israel's most powerful leaders have already spoken out to congratulate the president-elect. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is patting Trump on the back and saying the Republican is a true friend of the state of Israel. The Israeli leader has just released a statement promising that he will work with Trump to advance security, stability, and peace in the region. Knesset Speaker Yuli Edelstein began today's parliamentary session in Jerusalem with a message of hope for both Trump and the United States, saying he's confident that the alliance between the two countries will remain strong during Trump's term in office. Education Minister Naftali Bennett is already focused on the impact a Trump presidency will have on the future of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Bennett is also congratulating Trump on his victory, claiming his newfound presidency will mark a shift in U.S. policy in the region by ending the era of Palestinian statehood. Bennett, who heads the right-wing Jewish Home Party, believes that a Trump leadership will, quote, immediately retract the notion of a Palestinian state in the center of Israel, a state which he believes could cause major damage to Israel's security. Meanwhile, the U.S. ambassador to Israel, Dan Shapiro, is already calling on Donald Trump to uphold the Iran nuclear deal, an agreement that has been highly contested in the Jewish state. The nuclear pact was brokered under American leadership between 6 world powers and Iran last year, as a means of systematically blocking Iran's pathway to creating a nuclear weapon. Israel has long remained a critic of the deal, and Donald Trump himself has continued to call the accord the worst deal ever negotiated. Yet it remains unclear if he will actually reverse the deal once in office, and Dan Shapiro is already on a mission to prevent that from happening. Polls have varied when it comes to which candidate the most Israeli American support, but everybody can come to the agreement on one issue: the need for the next U.S. president to be a strong supporter of the Jewish state. So how are Israelis feeling now that Trump has been elected? ILTV's Aaron Porras has more on this story.
The most recent polls coming out of Israel were fairly unanimous in their findings that most Israeli American expatriates, and indeed most Israelis, preferred a Trump victory over Hillary Clinton. While with the votes counted and the dust settled, Israelis on the street seem to have more mixed reactions today.
I think Trump will be better for Israel. He said a few times that he is going to transfer the embassy of U.S. to Jerusalem. He says he will not impose his will for settlement in between the Palestinian and Israel. So I think it's better for us.
Israel cannot rely on a person which one day says something and the other day says another thing. And that's why I'm very unhappy, and to be more precise, I'm disappointed.
Despite having little more than rhetoric as evidence, President-elect Trump's promises of developing a strong U.S.-Israel relationship and relocation of the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem were among the common themes prompting Israeli support for the Republican candidate. The second highest concern, of course, was Middle East security, a subject Israelis felt would be better handled by Trump's demeanor and candor.
We live in very precarious, dangerous times, and we have the threat of ISIS all over the world, and it's a moment in time that we have to really take stock and be really strong. And Israel needs to stay strong with strong support of America. And only a man like Donald Trump, who is rough around the edges, and I pray that he has the wisdom to be refined and have advisors helping him along the way. But he's a breath of fresh air. He's not a politician, and he's not full of corruption. And that is what I voted for. I voted against Hillary, who represents to me someone who can't be trusted.
Regardless of allegiance or party affiliation, at least one thing seems to be consistent among Israeli voters: a general malaise with respect to either party candidate.
I think on the whole the Republicans and Donald Trump will be better for Israel, but I think on the whole it's going to be a very tough pill to swallow for the American people, and I think it's a surprise.
The Americans didn't have a good person to choose in their elections, but they somehow managed to choose the worst of two options, at least for America. For Israel, I don't know if it really matters.
This is Aaron Porras reporting for ILTV.
Joining us now is Dr. Chaim Weitzman, an Israeli relations specialist, and he's here to discuss the future of the United States relations in the Middle East, especially with Israel. Thanks so much for coming in.
It's a pleasure.
So to begin, let's talk about the Iranian nuclear deal, which is on everybody's minds. Trump has voiced his concerns over the agreement, calling it one of the worst deals to be made in the history of the United States. And many Americans, especially the U.S. ambassador to Israel, are concerned that he will now reverse the deal. Is that something that we can expect to happen during his presidency?
No, he can't do it. He's not the only partner there. He has other mid-sized superpowers. He has other large superpowers as his partners there. And what happens if he revokes the agreement? Iran may go being a nuclear country in almost no time. So he won't revoke the agreement. He won't do anything about it. I hope he will do his best to prevent Iran from becoming a nuclear country in 8 years. Coincides with his end of term if he is reelected. So yes, he does have a role there, but he cannot revoke it.
Now, how do you think Trump's foreign policy in the Middle East will affect Israel, in specific respect to Syria, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the Palestinian Authority?
The question is, how much importance will the United States under President Trump will attribute to the Middle East? Apparently, the United States is almost or already independent in terms of energy. So they don't need the oil from the Middle East. And Mr. Trump already expressed his views that he doesn't want to stay in close relationship with Saudi Arabia, for example, and provide them with weapons and so on and so forth. So if the United States loses its interest in the Middle East, it will affect Israel. On the other hand, if they stay with interest in the Middle East, he may try to push Israel to make some concessions in order to promote the peace or the negotiations, at least, towards peace. So depends on the interest of the United States. In Syria, it is very, very difficult right now because Russia is already there. The United States will not engage in fight with Russia. So they will have to come to an agreement with Russia who does what. And maybe they will leave West Syria to the Russians and concentrate on the eastern part, Raqqa and so on, of Syria.
Now, over the last 8 years, many have questioned the relationship between Barack Obama and America's commitment to Israel, especially because of his relationship with the Prime Minister here in Israel. Is there hope that there will be a stronger bilateral connection between the United States and Israel under a Trump presidency?
First of all, we have to remember that under Obama's presidency, Israel received weapons and other military equipment more than in any other term, and more than under any other president. So and we just signed with the Americans under President Obama the 10-year agreement. So I don't know. I mean, Mr. Trump said that he will demand money for the weapon he sends. And he didn't say he won't do it with Israel. So he may, if he act on his word, he may say, okay, I will continue to provide you with weapon and military equipment, but you will have to pay for it. So we don't know. Now, people tend to say that under a Republican president, the relationship are more warmer or closer or whatever. There is no basis for it. The relationship with President Clinton were the best we could expect. And the relationship with President George W. Bush were very good. However, George W. Bush was the one who insisted on having elections in the Palestinian Authority and brought Hamas to power. So
that's something to keep in mind.
It's too early to define.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming in, Dr. Weitzman, and we'll just have to see what happens.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. Thank you very much.
Now that the dust has settled a bit, it looks like all the fears that U.S. President Barack Obama may take one last swing at the Middle East peace process are now losing steam. For months, there have been rumors that before leaving office in January, the president might try to force Israel to accept his vision of a final status agreement with the Palestinians. The most severe of the suggested scenarios included Washington's advancement of a UN Security Council resolution recognizing Palestinian statehood. Other presidents have made similar moves during their final days in office, like Ronald Reagan's recognition of the Palestine Liberation Organization in 1988, and Bill Clinton setting the parameters of a two-state solution in January 2001. But after the U.S. brokered peace talks stalled under his watch back in 2014, Obama really doesn't appear as though he wants to invest any more effort in the process. During their last official meeting, Obama seemed to defer on the subject of international intervention to Benjamin Netanyahu, by acknowledging the Israeli prime minister will remain in power long after he leaves the White House. And now that he's been succeeded by the head of a rival party, any last hope of the Democratic leaders forging a Middle East legacy may have all but vanished. So all in all, at this point, it looks like Obama's so-called lame duck surprise for Israel is fading without a single quack. Now, the biggest question for Palestinians and Israelis alike is what will Donald Trump's policies end up looking like in the Middle East? Dr. Chuck Freilich is a former Deputy National Security Advisor, and he joins us today to discuss three major issues of concern: the American embassy in Tel Aviv, the future of Israeli settlements, and the two-state solution. Thanks so much for coming in.
My pleasure.
So, to begin, Donald Trump promised during his campaign, like every other candidate since 1995, that he would finally move the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Now that he's a president-elect, can we expect that to happen? Do you think he's really going to follow through?
Well, I think President-elect Trump, like other presidents, will now have to face reality. There are all sorts of things that one says in electoral campaigns that are easy to say in campaigns that are much harder to deliver on once you're in office. And I think Mr. Trump will have to realize that as president, he has to run the world, so to speak. And things that he says, let alone does, have dramatic results, and they can lead to all sorts of consequences. They can lead to mass, if the United States now moves the embassy to Jerusalem, the result will probably be mass demonstrations throughout the Arab world. Maybe more than demonstrations, maybe severe violence. That's something you have to take into account. The question is also, what does moving the embassy to Jerusalem mean? Is he saying, I'm moving it to West Jerusalem and just recognizing West Jerusalem as Israel's capital? That's something that I think all of us find consensual in Israel. Or is he talking about something beyond that, East Jerusalem, in which case the Arab world will be up in arms?
Now, the Obama White House and State Department have always been very critical of Israeli settlements, which is another major issue and obstacle to peace between the Israelis and Palestinians. How do you think a Trump policy is going to affect Israeli settlements today?
Well, again, I think things that you see from here, you don't see from there. And we'll see what President Trump thinks and does once he's actually in office. The question is, what is good for Israel? Now, some people believe that the settlements are good for us, that Israeli control of the West Bank is good for our long-term future. And other people believe, this is myself included, that Israel's ongoing control of the West Bank threatens our future as a primarily Jewish and democratic state. So is he going to leave us alone with that? Is that good for us? I don't think so. Other people think it is good for us. I would also take into account that maybe in the short term he'll decide to leave Israel alone. But if he finds as president that this doesn't meet his needs, maybe conflicts with some of his needs in the Arab world, the international community, this is a guy who has no sentiments. I mean, this is really a case of le'atah moi. I'm the state. And what's good for me is what's good for the world. He can change his positions overnight without blinking twice.
Now, we've seen a lot of Israeli leaders, especially Education Minister Naftali Bennett, come out and say that this is the end of the era of the idea of a Palestinian statehood now that Trump is going to be president. You know, he announced that he would give up on a two-state solution for as long as Israel would. Is there any indication that there's a chance for a two-state solution now that Trump will be in power?
Well, unfortunately, I don't think there was a chance for a two-state solution for this foreseeable future in any event before this election. The current Israeli government is a hardline rightist government. It's not about to make the concessions that would be required for a deal. The Palestinians are, I think, hopelessly split between the West Bank and Gaza. If they wanted to make a deal, at least if the PA wanted to, they couldn't. And President Abbas is on his way out. Now we have Washington, which I don't think will be minded towards a deal either, so we don't have any of the components that we need to reach a deal. But again, I believe that a two-state solution isn't just in Israel's interest, it's absolutely vital.
Well, thank you so much for coming in. We're just going to have to wait and see what a Trump presidency looks like.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Haters of the Jewish state adopt many different tactics in their battle against Israel. ILTV's Aaron Viner spoke with Dan Dyker, who's the project director of the Program to Counter Political Warfare and BDS at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, to find out more about both issues as well as what's being done to combat them.
Aaron, political warfare is a type of non-military terrorism that includes economic assault, political assault, social and cultural attacks that were used successfully during the Cold War between the United States and the former Soviet Union. And now those various forms of, and they're lethal warfare, non-military lethal warfare, are being used against the existence of the State of Israel to delegitimize the Jewish state, to demonize the Jewish state, with the ultimate goal of unraveling the Jewish state and causing a major implosion within Israel due to a lack of confidence of Israel's own public.
In the boycott, divestment, and sanctions campaign against Israel, is it part of the larger context of political warfare?
Well, yes. The boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, which is called BDS, is a subset of the larger political war against Israel. And the boycott, BDS, is not just about boycotting a store in New York or a cultural event in Los Angeles or a rock event, whether it's trying to get boycott Queen not to come to Israel, the rock group. But in fact, it is part of a larger war to destroy Israel by multiple types of assault. So we have to understand that BDS, in its broadest sense, is just as lethal and as dangerous as terrorism is, because its goals are the very same as the goals of Hamas, as the goals of Hezbollah, which is to destroy Israel by terrorism, which is why Israel has, since 2015, taken a far more proactive, urgent approach to countering BDS, shaming the leaders of BDS, and taking other measures that can't be discussed on television regarding BDS activists, and I would call them assaulters or really terrorists.
What is your take on the campaign that has been launched by Justice Minister Ayelet Shaked and Public Security Minister Gilad Erdan to stop incitement on social media?
Well, this is an important question because it's an important part of BDS. People in the beginning, for the first years of the BDS movement, which essentially got going ideologically at the Durban, South Africa Conference Against Racism, quite ironically, in 2001, until today, which is 17 or 15 years later, incitement to murder Israelis, incitement against Israel as the new apartheid regime, the new South African apartheid regime, the new Nazi regime, is part and parcel of this multi-front violent campaign that we understand in the narrow sense of BDS, of boycott, divestment, and sanctions. The actions taken by two senior ministers in the Israeli government, Justice Minister Shaked and Strategic Affairs and Public Security Minister Gilad Arden, represent a new, aggressive, proactive, ministerial counterattack against this type of political and economic warfare. And going to Facebook, which is one of perhaps the single most important online platform in the world, with well over a billion users, possibly even 2 billion users at this point, they have got to know that incitement to terrorize and murder Jews and Americans and Christians and others by radical Islamic advocates, leadership, and their supporters should be redlined, should be vomited out of these platforms. And Israel now is taking a much more aggressive approach. They did the same thing with Brussels Airlines that succumbed to a boycott of a dessert product called halva that was manufactured in a West Bank factory by Jews and Palestinians together, by Israelis and Palestinians together. That was rescinded because of a major countermeasure by the Israeli government. This, what you have asked about the two ministers, represents a new, more aggressive approach, and this approach, in my estimation, will continue as we continue to move forward to counterattack the BDS assault.
Facebook has long faced charges of looking the other way when users post racist, anti-Israel, or anti-Semitic content. Well, doing so is actually illegal in Germany, and Berlin is taking action. ILTV's Natalie Twersky has more on this story.
German prosecutors say Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg and 3 other company executives are under investigation for breaking national hate speech law by failing to remove offensive posts. The official complaint lists not only 438 instances of racism and Holocaust denial, but actual calls to murder and violence. And the administrators at the social media giant allegedly refused to remove the objectionable content, despite repeated requests by users. German law expressly forbids any kind of hate speech targeting groups, glorification of the Nazi regime, or Holocaust denial. The country's justice minister is threatening to take legal measures if the company does not comply with German standards by March. Facebook officials say they can't comment on the proceedings at this time, except to say they lack merit. According to the Bloomberg Billionaires Index, released just a few days ago, Zuckerberg is the 5th richest person in the world, with a $52 billion fortune in the bank.
And now for our Hebrew word of the day. The last 24 hours have been emotionally charged for everyone, regardless of political affiliation. And here at ILTV, we know that many of our viewers are just the slightest bit confused. That's why today's word is bilbul, or confusion. There are many times you can find yourself mibulbal, or confused, just like the word. It's a very confusing word. Like when you're learning calculus, when men talk to women, when you find your house keys in the refrigerator after a night of sleepwalking. And of course, when the candidate you hoped for wasn't chosen. But whatever bilbul you're dealing with, remember that you're not alone. So get a helping hand, ask some questions, and be patient. All your bilbulim will work out in time. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast.
ILTV's weather forecast is sponsored by Adopt a Savta, taking care of Israel's lonely Holocaust survivors.
Tonight you can expect mostly clear skies at the low of 67 degrees or 19 degrees Celsius. Then tomorrow should be partly cloudy as temperatures drop to become more seasonal. The high should be about 81 or 27 degrees Celsius. All right, everybody, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.8 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv. Thanks for watching and see you tonight.